Well, welcome and good morning to this Sunday morning worship service on Memorial Day weekend, the beginning of summer, and also a time to remember all those who gave their life during the wars. And that would include my father and his father. So I thank them for their service and all those who died. I remember them today. You are at South Church, Portsmouth, New Hampshire. I am the Reverend Susan Suchocki Brown, and I am glad to have with me this morning worship associates and those presenting the service and those who are offering music to us. And I work with worship associates. This morning, worship associate is Arthur Eves. Arthur, will you fill us in on all of the service?
Sure. Well, today we're very fortunate to have a storytelling partnership. Jen Del Deo will be offering the story for all ages, and Tom Barry is doing the service. Tom has been at South Church for 6 years. For a lot of that time, people know him from the kitchen ministry. He was the go-to guy for coffee. So our spiritual life has been dependent on him for some time. He was a mentor in our coming of age program and has been on both fellowship associates and a number of other parts of the church. He lives in South Berwick and spends a lot of time in the woods and on the water enjoying this lovely place. Tom.
Yes, thank you, Arthur. I was often alongside the real head honcho of coffee, who was Kevin Lee. Of course, I would be remiss without mentioning that. But yes, thank you. I am honored to give today's sermon, which I entitled "I Encourage Us." It has a deep connection to my life and connection to our theme of the month of story. So I hope you enjoy it. And I am happy to work with our Director of Music Ministry, Joanne Connolly, on the service. So Joanne?
Thanks, Tom. Very nice to be with you three, and especially to welcome Tom to the pulpit, albeit virtual.
Yeah.
When Tom and I had some communication about his service, he talked about the power of stories in our lives and having faith in oneself. So I thought we should sing Meditation on Breath. Centering in ourselves and having faith in ourselves. So we'll sing that, and also the journey of the stories he's talking about. We'll sing out praises for the journey. Susan Adams has chosen other music around this theme to round it out, and I think it'll be a wonderful service for Memorial Day weekend. And here we are. Back to you, Susan.
Thank you. Arthur, time for all ages.
Yes, that will be Jen Del Deo.
And we have a great reveal.
Yes. Well, that was the partnership between Tom and Jen.
As you can tell, we are always so glad to be with you. Even in a virtual world, we manage to find a way to stay connected. And we're happy that you are here. Happy Memorial Day weekend to you all. Be well, be safe.
The South Church Spiritual Book Group is hosting a discussion of Surviving the White Gaze, a memoir by Rebecca Carroll on Wednesday, June 9th at 7 p.m. All are welcome. Please contact South Church Book Group at gmail.com for the Zoom link. A reminder that slates from our roof are still available for a donation of $20 or more each Sunday from 1 to 3 p.m. on the portico. Charcuterie boards, chalk slates, canvas, house signs, clocks. What will you do with your piece of history? If you have any questions, please contact Lori Bilby at turningtide@comcast.net. Wouldn't you love to spend 3 hours greeting guests in a lovely South End pocket garden on Saturday, June 26th? Act fast. Friday, June 25th shifts filled up very quickly. Please help us continue our most successful annual fundraiser by signing up for a shift via the Sign Up Genius in your Sunday morning email. Thanks in advance for your enthusiasm and your help. And members of the Pocket Garden Tour Committee will be selling Pocket Garden Tour tickets on the 3 Sundays prior to the tour, June 6th, 13th, and 20th, from 1 to 3 p.m. on the lawn. Please consider bringing a check or cash for ticket purchases, although the hope is to have credit card sales available. Pre-tour tickets are $20, and day of tour tickets are $25. Bridging is coming. That means we would really love for all of you to participate in this beloved South Church tradition. Send us a picture of each of you and a bridge. It can be you at a real bridge. You can draw a picture of a bridge and take a photo of you holding it. Make a little Lego bridge. Use a Zoom background of a bridge. There are a billion ways to get creative. Do what's fun and accessible for you. This is for every kid and every adult. If you have a certain transition that you'd like to mark, tell us what it is when you send us your photos. Please email your information to Jen Del Deo by Friday at jendeldeo@southchurch-uu.org.
You gotta do when the Spirit says do. You gotta do when the Spirit says do. When the Spirit says do, you gotta do. Oh Lord, you gotta do when the Spirit says do. You gotta sing when the Spirit says sing. You gotta sing when the Spirit says sing. When the Spirit says sing, you gotta sing. Oh Lord, you gotta sing when the Spirit says sing. You gotta dance when the Spirit says dance. You gotta dance when the Spirit says dance. When the Spirit says dance, you gotta dance. Oh Lord, you gotta dance when the Spirit says dance. You gotta laugh when the Spirit says laugh. You gotta laugh when the Spirit says laugh. When the Spirit says laugh, you gotta laugh. Oh Lord, you gotta laugh when the Spirit says laugh. You gotta shout when the Spirit says shout. You gotta shout when the Spirit says shout. When the Spirit says shout, you gotta shout. Oh Lord, you gotta shout when the Spirit says shout. You gotta laugh when the Spirit says laugh. You gotta dance when the Spirit says dance. You gotta sing when the Spirit says sing. You gotta do when the Spirit says do.
What stories do you tell yourself? What sort of narrative has guided your life? What's your view of the universe, of your place in it? It matters. Stories are how we make sense of the endless facts of the world. Compelling stories pick and choose the facts they use, but shape a narrative that makes emotional sense. Are you the hero of your stories, the victim, the silent witness of life passing by? At different points in my life, I have been all of the above, and look forward to creating new stories where I'm a participant, not a protagonist, a co-creator, not a hero. How we relate to the world and one another has so much to do with the stories we tell. Often our stories are most interesting for what they say about us, as we reconfigure the random experiences of life into the structure of our personal narratives. This weekend we celebrate Memorial Day, a day to remember fallen warriors, our war dead. As often happens with national stories, Memorial Day, or Decoration Day as it was initially known, has been reshaped from its origins to serve many different cultural purposes over the past 150 plus years. Its roots rose in traditions of Southern culture, perhaps drawn from Roman or Greek martial myths, or African traditions, or an amalgam of these and other influences. Decorating the graves of the war dead was a frequent practice throughout the Confederacy, a practice of grieving and valorizing the fallen. In 1865, in the recently freed city of Charleston, South Carolina, Union POWs who had died of disease and been buried in a mass grave were reinterred with much ceremony and celebration by some 10,000 liberated blacks. According to historian David Blight, the war they had boldly announced had been about the triumph of their emancipation over a slaveholders' republic. They were themselves the true patriots. 3 years later, in 1868, the leader of a Union veterans group, General John Logan, called for a national day to decorate the graves of the war dead with flowers as a way of remembrance and honoring their sacrifice. It was intended to help reconcile North and South by adopting a Southern practice, leaving slavery out of the narrative, and equating the losses on both sides. By focusing on collective grief and the shared valor and sacrifice of all the fallen, Decoration Day helped the Civil War become a tragic misunderstanding, a case of fratricide, and the end of slavery merely a footnote. Over the years, its roots in the Civil War have been forgotten, and Memorial Day has become a day to remember and honor the servicemen and women who died in all of our wars. Most of us have lost friends and kin to war, even if not in this generation. The loss of lives of so much promise is tragic and should be recognized. Still, for most people today, Memorial Day marks the official start of summer with its own 3-day weekend and cookouts. We can reclaim this holiday by honoring all those who have gone before us and who stand among us, who have given their lives in the struggle for justice and freedom, and who have been marginalized from our own stories. We can tell new, more inclusive stories that give voice to those who are voiceless, and listen with respect and not mockery to those stories that might include different facts and interpretations from our own. If we listen carefully, perhaps we will learn something new. For all stories convey some emotional truth, even if we cannot agree on the facts. We light our chalice today with these words from Rumi's Story Water. A story is like water that you heat for your bath. It takes messages between the fire and your skin. It lets them meet and it cleans you. Very few can sit down in the middle of the fire itself like a salamander or Abraham. We need intermediaries. A feeling of fullness comes, but usually it takes some bread to bring it. Beauty surrounds us, but usually we need to be walking in the garden to know it. The body itself is a screen to shield and partially reveal the light that's blazing inside your presence. Water, stories, the body, all the things we do are mediums that hide and show what's hidden. Study them and enjoy this being washed with the secret we sometimes know and then not. And now let us recite our mission statement. At South Church, we nurture spiritual growth through worship, learning, and community. We celebrate the worth and dignity of all people, and we inspire one another to act on our faith in the larger community.
When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I breathe out, I'll breathe out love.
Good morning. I hope you're having an adventurous weekend. Our story today is written by a UU minister named Reverend Christina Leone-Tracy, and it's called The Broken Story Story. Once upon a time, there was a man with a story. This wasn't any old once upon a time story, not one that you could find on a bookshelf or hear around the campfire. This was his story and no one else's. This story had been carefully crafted. It began before he was born, and this story told of his loves and fears, his dreams realized and his dreams yet to come. This story was complete. It told his whole life, including those bits that still existed in his imagination. In fact, this story was so complete and he was so happy with his story that he carried it around to make sure it was safe. It was somewhat bulky and unwieldy, but he didn't mind. It was his story. One thing about his story was it was very fragile. Made up of many pieces and held together by only his own imagination, he was worried it might break apart at any minute. And so he grew more and more protective of his story, and he held it even closer. As he went about his life, he checked on the story to make sure he was following it correctly. He avoided adventure and unknowns because, well, they might break his story. Then, one day, the inevitable happened. Without warning, his story broke. It was unforeseen, and he hadn't done anything wrong at all. But there it was, laying in 1,000 shattered pieces on the ground, with the sunlight glinting off the bits of story he had so carefully protected for all those years. He was heartbroken. And since his story hadn't said to put the pieces back together, he was at a loss. What now? He sat down next to the pile of pieces and he cried. He didn't know what to do. A while later, maybe it was minutes, maybe it was hours, a group of people came out of the nearby building and saw him sitting on the sidewalk, surrounded by a pile of broken pieces, clearly in need of help. "What happened here?" a woman asked. "My story, it's gone. I worked so hard to build it, to protect it, to keep it from harm, and now it's gone. Gone," he wailed. "Is this the story here?" a man asked. "Yes, look at it. There's nothing left of it." "It looks like it's here, not gone," said a child. "We just have to put it back together." "Put it back together? There's no way. You don't even know what it looked like. How will you put it back together if you don't even know me?" The child was tenacious. "Don't worry, with all of us here to help, we'll put it back together in a way that you would never even expect. You never know, it might be more beautiful than before." So they swept up the pieces of this man's story carefully and went together into the building from which they had come out. They poured him some hot coffee and sang a song he had never heard before. Something about coming again and again, though you've broken your vows 1,000 times. The song was soothing and the coffee was warm. He began to feel hope again that his story could be put back together. And it took a long time. Maybe it was days, maybe it was years, but they got it all back together and they added new parts. And some of the old parts didn't fit anymore. But that was okay. The child had been right. It was more beautiful than before. And this time, the story was held together not only by his imagination, but the imagination and support of an entire community. And it wasn't nearly so fragile. And it even allowed for adventure. We have some pieces to put back together in our story. South Church is a place where we can all work together to build our stories, our collective story, and our individual stories. And there are always people to help. I love you, and I hope to see you soon.
South Church shares the collection each month with local organizations that we as a congregation have chosen to support. May's recipient is the Lovering Health Center in Greenland, New Hampshire. Grounded in a feminist ideal of patient participation and responsibility in choices and decision-making about their personal health care, the Lovering Health Center is dedicated to providing confidential, comprehensive, and accurate sexual and reproductive health information and services to all in a supportive environment. To donate, go to our website, southchurchuu-uu.org, and click on the donate button at the top right of your screen, or send a check to our office on Court Street in Portsmouth.
Precious day, we're all gathered here, and those far away, for this time we share, with love and care, we give thanks, for this precious day,
Let's be in an attitude of prayerful reflection as we think for a couple moments of all that surrounds us. As you can tell, I'm in a new surrounding, and I'm ever so grateful to be at my place at Salisbury. All around are leaves and trees and pollen. So I offer a prayer of thanksgiving for the places where we get renewed, and the places that sustain and support us, and the places that challenge us. I am ever so grateful to be here. I'm ever so grateful to be able to offer prayer, albeit virtually. I pray that any concerns, any challenges, any struggles that you have, you'll let us know so that we can record them and let people know that we're going to help you, that we're there for you. Let us be ever grateful for the ability to join together virtually across the miles, across the places, across the start of a new season. And on this Memorial Day weekend, let us remember all those who gave their life in battle and fighting for peace, and who died in the process. I offer my thanksgiving to you. I offer my prayerful presence to you. We are here for you. Let us know if you need anything. Be at peace. Find a place this weekend to center and enjoy. May it be so.
You should be back to normal in about 6 months. Never before have I kept tabs on a date provided to me by a medical professional as closely as I monitored that 6-month anniversary date. It was March 2015, and the day before I had undergone an 8.5-hour surgery to remove a benign tumor the size of a small grape from the top of my brain. The tumor had been identified the prior summer after several weeks of fatigue and headaches led me to a local emergency room, where an MRI identified the lesion, partially wrapped around the sagittal sinus, the structure that carries spent blood from the brain through the jugular to the heart. It was a complicated surgery. In the months between initial diagnosis and surgery, I continued to experience headaches and developed other symptoms such as facial tics and speech arrest. Once the surgery was complete and successful, I couldn't wait to be back to normal in 6 months' time. I watched my calendar. My recovery was slow and largely unremarkable, but it did not benchmark well to the 6-month time frame to normalcy provided by both my surgeon and neurologist. And although I was thankful that my tumor was not cancer, my self-esteem since the diagnosis and subsequent surgery had plummeted. I was asking myself questions, telling myself stories. You are damaged. You will always be unwell. You are no longer strong. You will never be the same. Life will never be the same. The dark tendrils of depression were tickling the bottoms of my feet to remind me of their presence. We will probably hit a few rough patches in the coming weeks and months. It was late December 2018. These were the words of Cindy Brown, then chair of our board of trustees. She included them in the church's announcement regarding Reverend Chris Holton Jablonski and Lauren Smith's departure as South Church's settled ministers. About 1 month later, our new, at the time, board chair, CJ Cogswell, then laid out the board's plan of hiring an interim minister while undertaking steps to move into search for our new settled minister. It was a complicated time for our church. Our board, staff, and lay leaders buoyed us. They stepped up, assuming many roles not in their job descriptions. They made hard decisions. Many of us looked forward to the placement of the interim minister as a milestone in this transition, this journey towards settlement, towards spiritual and congregational growth. We watched our calendars. We asked ourselves questions. What would our new minister be like? How long will this process take? What will our church look like? Will it be the same? Will it be different? Some time has passed, and I won't go into details, but suffice to say our congregation has been challenged in the years since that announcement. An interim minister assignment was ended early. A global pandemic delayed the search process and interrupted the functioning of our church. And the search that did not result in a new match for our new minister occurred earlier this year. What are you going to think about and dream about? When she turned 3 years old, my niece Scarlett began a new ritual each evening as I was putting her to bed. After recounting our days, reading a few stories, and tucking her in, she, long the queen of the bedtime stall, aren't they all, would look into my eyes and ask, Uncle Man, what are you going to think about and dream about? It was not complicated. It was beautiful. I would reply to the dream part of her question by describing some far-flung story where she and I would be masters of our own destiny on some grand adventure. I am going to dream about you and I with the dogs in a spaceship flying high above the earth, spying on your little brother with the help of our giant telescope. I would then address the first half of her question. What was I going to think about? I responded with something we had shared that made me grateful. I am going to think about how loving you were to your little brother when he fell off the monkey bars and hurt his hands. I would then ask her the same questions, and her responses would often be so much better than my own, as most things are through the eyes and minds of children. In contemplating my experiences, my stories, and researching the concept of story, I came across the work of writer Emily Esfahani Smith, which introduced me to a very interesting topic in psychology known as narrative identity, the internalized story you create about yourself. Think of it as your own personal myth. You decide what experiences, memories, emotions, people, and events get the most weight in what and how you feel when thinking about yourself. In other words, what are you going to think about and dream about when you think and dream about yourself? Northwestern University psychologist Professor Dan McAdams is an expert on this topic, studying it for over 30 years. During this time, Dr. McAdams has uncovered interesting trends. People who are driven to contribute to society and to future generations, he found, are more likely to tell redemptive stories about their lives, or stories that transition from bad to good. The opposite of redemptive stories are contamination stories, stories that can be interpreted as going from good to bad. People who tell contamination stories, McAdams has found, are less generative or less driven to contribute to society or to younger generations. They also tend to be more anxious, more depressed, and to feel that their lives are less coherent compared to those who tell redemptive stories. People who tell redemptive stories rate their lives as more meaningful than those who tell stories that have either no or fewer redemptive sequences. Narrative identity is important. When we want people to understand us, we share our stories or parts of our stories with them. When we want to know who another person is, we ask them to share their parts of their stories. What do you think about and dream about? Partly to process my health challenges and partly as a natural course of growing older, I have been thinking a lot recently about my narrative identity and have concluded that many of my narrative identity stories have been contamination stories. Surely, I have been blessed with more than my share of redemption stories, but my overall narrative identity has, over recent years, shifted towards more good to bad than bad to good. I am not the same person I was before my surgery. I am no longer thriving. This is complicated, and I want it to change. In reflecting on these thoughts within the context of our shared faith, I am reminded we work to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of all people. I am worthy of my own dignity. Therefore, I have embarked upon a journey to change my narrative identity by emphasizing my redemptive stories, which are plentiful. I am blessed with health. I have had several clean MRIs in a row over the last few years and have no reason to believe this will change moving forward. I feel as though my work makes a difference. I recently celebrated 15 years of employment at a local biotech company. We make high-quality reagents that scientists use to advance the understanding of complex diseases such as cancer and even COVID. I am close with my partner, her daughters, and our shared families. Our bonds only strengthened during this pandemic over the last year plus. I am in community with you all. In our South Church community, we've journeyed through shared ups and downs of our church's transition from settled ministry. There have been, and still remain, many questions about what we will be, about who we will be. Over the past years, I have often thought about our narrative identity, the collective story of South Church that we share with the world. Recently, the COVID-19 pandemic has been a dominating force, which can feel like a huge weight that acts to compound our other challenges. As both individuals and as a community, we have been experiencing new stresses, fearing what the future may bring, what the world may look like post-pandemic, constantly being concerned by the risk of illness, spending time in quarantine, isolated from our networks, our neighbors, coworkers, friends, family, one another. We are all experiencing a new normal, wrought with challenges, but our congregation has done so with exceptional grace. Throughout this pandemic, we have continued to stand up for and act in line with our Unitarian Universalist beliefs. We maintained community and continued spiritual growth, in part by the rapid transition from in-person to online services and programming. These include continued engagement with our beloved music program. We successfully fundraised to fund this year's operating budget and started the important work of restoring the slate roof. Our youth have had plentiful opportunities to remain meaningfully connected to our community and to one another through our religious education programming efforts. We have cultivated a deep and meaningful relationship with our interim minister, Reverend Susan Suchocki Brown. She might as well be a doctor, she's great. Our associate and shared ministry teams have continued to live out their missions. This includes the work that we continue to do for social justice, never more important than in our world today. We adopted the collaborative leadership model as a congregation. Buddhist teacher Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams writes, "Today's progressive leaders must systematically and lovingly prepare us to tolerate the inherent discomfort of change now in order to wedge open the way to transformation in the future." This pandemic has been difficult, as have parts of the last few years for our congregation. Our obligation is to ensure that we learn from the inherent discomfort of change so we may move into our next phase together. I am proud to stand side by side with you in order to continue our never-ending journey to be those progressive leaders in our community, a light in the darkness. The next time you are asked, what are you going to think about and dream about? What will your response be? Whatever it may be, your responses, your stories are our stories. And as such, they have the power to help mold our collective narrative identity. We are South Church. I encourage us to consider answering that question from a place of redemption. I encourage us to remember both our individual and collective strengths made possible by our growth during this time. I encourage us to continue to be kind with ourselves and with one another during the transitions that will come. I encourage us to write our church's next chapter together. I encourage us. May it be so.
Sing out praises for the journey, pilgrims we who carry on, searchers in the soul's deep yearnings, like our forebears in their time. We seek out the Spirit's wholeness in the endless human quest. Look inside your souls, the kindling of the heart fire pilgrims new. Find the Spirit always restless, find it in each mind and heart. Touch and hold that ancient yearning, kindling for a newfound truth. Stand we now
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
I'd like to speak the words of Reverend Dr. Natalie Maxwell Fenimore. We seek to be a home for all who desire our company. We seek to make a welcome for all of those in search of our good news. Come, come, little children, teens, young adults, adults, and elders. Come, families in great diversity. Come to this loving home and safe harbor, but not to find a place to escape this world. This is a community of engagement and of creativity. We come together to create boldly, dangerously. We must create the beloved community with an awareness of how difficult it is, because it is deep ministry. It is ministry that challenges us to bring our whole selves and engage deeply and for the long haul. Our faith, our tradition must call us into community. Our task is to create spaces where we might know and value each other. Let us listen to our stories.